It's time to meet the new boss at the Washington Post this week, with the Amazon founders showing up to answer questions from editors and reporters about how Jeff Bezos will run his newest acquisition. And these were no softballs. Some of the questions involved journalistic ethics. Nia Malika Henderson, you were there. What was the reaction to the new owner who had maintained this extraordinarily low profile before showing up at the Post?
That's right. I mean, he had an interview a couple of days before with our reporters there, but he isn't a guy who is very friendly to the press in terms of giving interviews. I will say, I mean, my initial reaction to the whole sale was sadness and shock. And I think that was everybody's response initially, because there's just such an attachment that folks at the Post have to the Graham family.
And that was my reaction as well, having worked there for so long.
How
could this be happening?
Yeah.
But then what was your second reaction?
My second reaction now is a lot of hope, and I think that's where we are in the newsroom more generally. If you look at what he said, he's talking about invention, he's talking about focusing on the customer, he's talking about patience, right, and sort of a long-term strategy, and this idea that the Post can't cut its way to growth, which I think a lot of folks wanted to hear.
I think in newspaper boardrooms across the country, every executive was saying, what does he know that we don't know? How is he going to save this? Why would he invest $250 million of his own money? Albeit that's not a lot of money, since he's worth $24 billion.
Right.
But I think
that's the key thing, is that he can spend a lot of money on this and not worry about, as so many acquisitions of struggling newspapers, squeezing profits out of a struggling.
Right, and your P&L has to match. And with digital revenue not living up to what print advertising and circulation revenue can be, you have to invent and you have to find new ways to get that revenue.
Let me read some of these tweets that Washington Post staffers, Eric Wemple and others, sent out while Jeff Bezos was still addressing the staff. The first one has to do with this question of how can you run a newspaper when at the same time Amazon and so frequently says no comment to the press. I've always felt, says Bezos, that the most powerful minds in the world can hold powerful inconsistencies. Okay, that's a duck. He was worried about any product, he says, that's 100% ad supported, because then, says Bezos, you start thinking your customer is advertisers. And he says if your customer base ages with you as a company, you're a Woolworths, meaning you're not around. You're a newspaper guy, David Zurich. Can the guy who revolutionized the book business and then online retailing help reinvent the way the news is delivered?
Howie, as with answers, I was thinking I've sat through too many of these new owners walking in the newsrooms. I've been through too many of them, and I have to say, for as cynical a lot as we are always incredibly optimistic, because now it's our mortgage payment sitting up there.
Right.
And we want this person to be a genius. Yes. We want him to be a genius. And so I was looking at the tweets, too, as they were coming out and thinking, oh, yeah, I've been there. We love them. But, he said the number one rule must be don't be boring, And I get that, but...
I've been saying that for 20 years. Newspapers too often write for the insiders and journalists write for other journalists. But is there a concern, Nia Malika, that this is a guy who still lives in Seattle, keeps his day job at Amazon, that he's going to be too hands-off and that he has no, as he put it, no magic wand?
Yeah, he has no magic wand. I think people sort of want him to be hands-off. I think the Post has had a really great run over this last 6 months. We got the new editor in Marty Barron. So I don't think we want him meddling in the editorial part of the paper. We want his business savvy, which is considerable.
On that point, Lauren, he says that the Washington Post does great investigative reporting, which is true, but then all these other sites come along and aggregate it for free, which takes away from wanting to, say, pay for a digital subscription.
Well, that is the whole newspaper problem right there in a nutshell, is that no one wants to pay for what's on the internet. Getting digital subscribers was very difficult, and it took the New York Times and the Washington Post a very long time to actually make that jump into the model.
In fact, the Baltimore Sun went digital before the Post. I have to point this out.
Okay, well,
there's your mortgage right there.
Bottom line is reporting is expensive. Great discussion, Nia Malika Henderson, David Zurich, Lauren Ashburn. Up next, 2 days to go before New York Democrats vote for mayor. Several leading candidates, and the press still fixated on Anthony Weiner mouthing off to a heckler.